Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's great to have you today, and my guest is someone who I've known and admired for a long time. Geoff Hall is our guest, and as many of you'd be familiar, he's the founder of Ortho Ed, which is an Orthodontic Education Program. But what we're talking about today is really about the magic of thinking big. And in this conversation, we talk about Geoff's experiences, his influences, the opportunities that he sees, and how to identify things that are going to work and how to try things and recover when things don't work. For anyone who's got an entrepreneurial bent at all, this is going to be a podcast that you're going to want to listen to and to reflect on and to come back to time and again, because Geoff shares a lot of life lessons, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of actionable ideas that I know that if you do take some notes on and apply, you'll absolutely get some great results. So this was a lot of fun to record. This was just Geoff and I shooting the breeze, and we've managed to hit record on a conversation that I hope you'll find really helpful for your own business and ambitions as well. Now, for those people who are new to our podcast, welcome. It's great to have you here. And if you want to come and join us at the Savvy Dentist Facebook group, please do come and find us there. It's a group for dental practice owners looking to, create more in their life so that you can, earn more and work less. And that's really what we're about. So come across and find us there. We look forward to welcoming you to that community. But for now, here's the conversation with Geoff Hall. I really hope you enjoy this. It's a lot of fun. And here he is. Geoff Hall, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us at the Savvy Dentist podcast. How are you, mate?
I'm well, Jesse, and thank you for your kind invitation as always. It's great to speak with you.
Mate, I always like talking to you, Geoff, and I know we have lots of conversations off the air, so it's nice for us to be able to record one. And, one of the things that I've always admired about you, mate, is a couple of things. One is you're incredibly bright when it comes to orthodontics and business, and not only are you incredibly bright, you've got a big heart that goes with that, mate. So I'm looking forward to having a chat today, so it should be a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Thanks for they're very kind words, Jesse. Not true, but very kind words.
They are true. They are absolutely true. Mate, I want to just talk for a moment about, we're recording this and we're coming through COVID. Victoria's still efficiently in lockdown. And, from time to time, I like to stick my nose to the wind and smell the breeze to see what's happening. I'm wondering from your perspective, how are you seeing things, how are you reading things, general economy, dentistry, or anything else you think is interesting?
Based in Victoria, the economy is really poor. And fortunately, JobKeeper is propping up the economy for a little while, but there will be a definite crash down the track. It's been interesting because when I speak to different companies, the companies that are doing the best are aligner companies as it stands at the moment. Through COVID, they've all got a big increase in income, and the dentists have got a lot of work, and which I was a bit surprised about to start off with. But then when you think about it, a lot of these people have got more money now because they're not going away. They're not spending money on petrol. And now they just want to actually do something for themselves. So I think there is actually, like all these situations, when there's adversity that happens, there are people who take on a different project and they can make adversity turn into success for them.
I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because one of the things that we spoke about, I was talking to you off air, we had an event a week or two ago called Practice Mastery, and one of the things that we spoke about at that event was being able to see the opportunity. Whenever there's upheaval, whenever there's turmoil, whenever there's disruption, there's always opportunity. And clearly, COVID has grabbed us all by the metaphoric shirt collar and given the world a bit of a shake and a bit of a wake-up call. And there are some people who are sitting back on their heels thinking, oh my God, what just happened? And there are others, like you've just identified, who are doing very well with it. So I want to ask you, Geoff, how do you go about spotting those opportunities? How do you keep your eyes peeled for those opportunities?
I think you've really got to think outside the box and stop thinking like a typical dentist. And I say that with all due respect to dentists, where it's all doom and gloom and we've got to do it the same way because that's what our instructors taught us to do. You know, and I think one of the biggest problems we ever happened was going to a dental school, and you got these instructors, and I don't know whether it was like that where you trained, but in Melbourne, you are brighter than the average person that gets into dentistry. And I don't know what they do to you, but it's like putting a high speed through your brain, and they actually destroy your thinking ability. And you come out, and to be a good dentist, I've got to cut that class 1 cavity, and it's got to be 0.7 millimeters wide, because if I go a bit wider, I'm a bad dentist. Yeah, all diagnosis, treatment planning, all that stuff has gone out the window. Yeah, and so we became the same dentist. I think what's happened historically, everybody made a lot of money out of dentistry. Now we've got far more competition. We've got more, and so dentists are not as busy now than what they were back then. So now we've got to start to think about different ways to differentiate ourselves. And you look at the successful people, that's what they all do. They differentiate themselves.
Look, I really like this conversation, Geoff, because, there's been a lot of talk about commoditisation in dentistry, I think for the last 10 years, but even more recently, that conversation seems to be gaining a bit more traction. And I know there's a view in some quarters that commoditisation is inevitable, that because skills are commoditised to an extent, technology is commoditised to an extent, therefore our practices must be commoditised. And I personally don't buy into that. But there seems to be this view in some quarters that that's the inevitability, and therefore to compete, in inverted commas, we've got to be a Walmart, or we've got to, do high volume, low fee type of dentistry. And that's one way of doing it. Of course, there's no one right way of anything. And mate, you know that and I know that. But can you speak to the commoditisation point for a moment?
Oh, look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's a little bit like a bell curve, because you're going to have these people, and I think the average person actually believes that commoditisation is inevitable. You see that with the corporate groups, with Bupa Dental and all that type of stuff, and they're branding it as a average service. In all honesty, because there's no longer the individualisation of Dr. Jones, that type of stuff, and they've done it on purpose. Because that way they can sell the practices and do all that type of stuff. But there's this great niche in the latter part of that bell curve for those practices that differentiate themselves. They can charge a higher fee, and people will go there. It's no different to buying a Mercedes, or going into the Marriott Vacation Club, or whatever it be. People will pay extra for that privilege to feel good. You look at that with every female. They'll spend $150, $200 on getting their hair done.
Oh, don't I know it?
Yeah, that's right. And here for me, it cost me $18. I wouldn't spend any more money than that. Okay, so but what it proves, they want the experience. They like the idea that they're in the chair, that they're being talked to, looked after for 2 or 3 hours. That's where we need to go in dentistry.
It's interesting, actually, mate. I agree with you 100%. But it's interesting, I think it was last year, I ran a workshop on marketing. We spoke about this very thing, and I showed a slide. There was a hair salon in Sydney. Speaking of haircuts and all the rest of it, I probably go to the same barber that you do, mate. And my wife probably goes to the same hairdresser as your partner. But the thing that I was remarking on in this particular workshop is there was a hair salon in Sydney that was charging $600 a haircut. And they were booked out 3 months ahead.
Yep.
And so it dispels the myth that to be busy, you've got to be cheap, and that people only want cheap. And so I'm curious to understand, where do you think this commoditisation, or this view that to compete or to scale or to mix it with the big kids, you've got to be high volume, low fee? Where's that view come from? Is it laziness, or is it? I don't mean laziness. So let me take that back. It's not laziness, because I know dentists are not lazy. They're industrious, hard-working sorts. But is it because they've never been taught to think about these things, or what is it?
I think that's part of it, and I think the other part of it is the health fund.
Yeah,
I think we are our own worst enemy. We look at the health fund, and if what's the recommended rebate? $85, and we're going to charge $100. When you go to a Medico, they don't even care what your Medicare rebate is. Now, there are bulk billing clinics And that, once again, is the commoditisation of medicine. But the good people, and that's who we're going to go to if we're sick, we're going to go. We're not going to argue over an extra $50 or $100 for a consultation. No. We want to see the right person, but there has to be a value proposition that you give that. Okay, and that's what most people don't do. They say they're great, and it's a given as far as I'm concerned. You've got to be a good dentist.
Yeah.
You've got to. And that's what people forget. That's a given in the industry. Okay. Whether you go to an accountant or a lawyer, you've got to be good. Then you've got to look at what the next stage is. How do you differentiate yourself to show people that you are different and you are the best?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that differentiation that comes through, you're absolutely right. Being a good dentist is kind of the entry point, isn't it? It is assumed knowledge. I call it the cover charge. You don't even get in the door unless you're
exactly
good.
Right. It's really interesting when I do my courses. The first thing I do in the course is I go around the room and say, why does a patient come and see you, Dr. Jones? And everyone says, I'm gentle, I'm caring, I do good work. Everyone, you walk around the room, and you say, well, what different? Why would I go to you instead of you? And most of them can't even answer that question.
I think, ladies and gents, if you're listening to this particular episode now, I'd really consider that question in detail, and you need to be able to have a good answer for it. Why should someone walk past 10 other practices to come to you? Or indeed, why should someone come to you full stop, go to any dentist and then walk past 10 other practices? So you need to know what your unique selling proposition is, or unique value proposition, or whatever it is that differentiates you in the marketplace. And I think saying, like Geoff said, that, I'm a good dentist, I'm caring, I'm gentle, or whatever it is, again, it's kind of assumed. It's the bare minimum, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to take it sort of one step further, and this is one of my real pet hates, as an older dentist, is you bring in a young dentist. So for example, I bring in a young dentist, and they automatically have the same fee that I have, and I go, this is ridiculous. So the only reason why Geoff Hall makes more money than the new dentist is because I'm quicker. Well, that's not right. It's because I have more knowledge, I understand it, et cetera, and it's no different to if you would go to your accountant. You've got different fee levels in an accounting practice. You've got your senior partner, your junior partner, and they're being charged out at different fee levels.
Yep. And
that should be the same principle even in your own practice. We do that sort of with hygienists, but it should be the same with dentists. A person who comes for their first year out shouldn't be charging $1,800 for a crown. They're the ones that you want to cheapen a little bit, and you increase your fee a lot more, so you're making more money as well. And you've got a way of getting those patients who are cost conscious to move across.
Yeah.
And building up that practice.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point, because I know, when I go to my solicitor or to my accountant, I get the bill and I look at, who's done what, and I see that the law student's being billed out at $250 an hour, and I think, wow, I wonder how much the law student's been paid, but that's that's another issue. But you're absolutely right. I look at the account and go, okay, so the partner's done this, the senior associate or the junior associate's done this, and then down we go. And of course, I actually think that's a really good thing to be doing in dentistry as well. And I'm curious to ask, why do you think most people don't do it?
Because they've been told by somebody that you can't have different fees different fee schedules in the practice. So somebody's told them, and one of the things that I keep on saying to people, ask yourself, can you do it better? Everything you do, and I don't think they do that enough. The same comes with the fee schedule. There was a guy in Melbourne years and years ago who was a real maverick, but the way he did his fees, I thought was really interesting. What he did was, it was a one surface amalgam, for argument's sake.
Yep.
His hourly rate was $400 an hour.
Yep.
Plus his lab fee.
Yep.
That's what he did. Okay. So he couldn't care whether it was a one surface, whether the item code was giving back $50 or $60. He charged an hourly rate plus a lab fee. And to be honest, and this was going back 25 years ago, I thought the guy was nuts. In fact, the guy was totally correct.
Well, interestingly, you should say that, because the very first practice I worked in as an associate out of the Navy, that is, it was exactly that. There was an hourly rate, and it was, I think back then, $400 an hour. And come what may, you billed $400 an hour and plus the lab fee. And at the time, I remember that was a bit controversial, and I remember it certainly raised a few eyebrows amongst the dental community. But I agree. I think it was just a novel way to look at things. And I think the thing that, we've got to look at here, Geoff, is the whole concept of a fixed mindset, thinking there's only one way to do things, right?
Exactly right. When I was in general practice, I suppose what changed, this was very, very early days. I had a young kid who I couldn't even do a filling. They cried in the chair. It was an hour and a half of my time. And this is going back to 1985, I think. And I was charged him $25 or $30. The parents refused to pay because I actually hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
And then I realised I've got to get out of this field of charging for my knowledge. I'm charging for my time. My 5 years of stress at dental school. That in itself should be an enormous hourly rate.
Not to mention the 90 minutes of hell dealing with a screaming child. I mean, that's probably worth a couple of grand in my world. There's not enough money in the world for me to do that. It was interesting, isn't it? Because it comes back to, we've all had, the patient say, you charge that for an x-ray, you press a button and it's a digital image these days. And I remember saying to a patient a little while ago, because he challenged me, said, your x-ray fee should have gone down because of, digitization and blah, blah, blah. And I just said to him, listen, mate, you're not paying for me to press the button and for the technology to do that. You're paying for my 25 years of diagnostic skills to be able to tell you what's on that. And really, I should be charging you double. So just zip it and call it quits.
It's funny you say that because I get the occasional patient in my practice who goes, how can you justify $6,000 or $7,000? Okay. And so I actually have a little box with brackets and wires. And sitting on the side, I said, well, we've got two options. I'll charge you $600-700 for this, and the do-it-yourself kit, or I'll charge you $7,000 for me doing it. But I'll be honest, that's where I want to piss the patient off and I want to see them again.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love, my brother tells this great story about this guy comes in and he's putting up a painting. He puts his nail on the wall. Yeah. And it's $100. And the dentist, who's the client, goes, how can you charge $100? He goes, it's $1 for the nail and it's $99 to know where to put it. And the dentist goes, I'm a dentist. I can't charge that hourly rate. And the guy goes, when I was a dentist, I couldn't charge it either.
Touche.
And this comes down to exactly what you're talking about, the mindset.
Yeah.
Let's get out of that particular mindset.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because one of the things in dentistry that I remember going through uni, and university for me, I had a great experience at high school. University I found quite tough and challenging on lots of different levels. And I remember being quite apprehensive going to clinic on a day-by-day basis because we had one or two people that would just kind of yell and scream. So it wasn't for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But I remember, coming out of dental school with my confidence perhaps not, what it could be or should be. And you can't.
We must have been brothers in our previous life.
I know.
That was exactly the same as me.
I know. And I walked into uni fairly confident. Not overly, but, confident enough. But and maybe that's just me. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is we kind of get caught up in the dogma of things and we do kind of assume that this is the way it's done. This is the way it's got to be. And I think one of the beauties, Geoff, I know that obviously you still do clinical work, but you've also had exposure to many other businesses as well, as have I. And I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about stepping outside of dentistry for a moment is the broadening of one's horizons and the ability to see how other industries do things. And in fact, that's the premise of this whole podcast is, the whole premise of this show is not invented here. We look at what's happening in other businesses and go, what can we make relevant? So I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you with that theme or that flavor is, as you've gone through your own learning experience and your own professional journey, what have been the experiences that have shaped your thinking that has allowed you to look outside of that box or given you the confidence to think a little differently to the mainstream?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think probably about, I suppose I trained over in America, so there was a lot of delegation.
Yeah.
And I love that concept. I realized that really what you've got is your knowledge. And you need to delegate. And that's why I love orthodontics, because it's that delegation that can make you scalable and very profitable. Because if you're doing it all yourself, you're not going to get the hourly rate. If you've got one patient sitting in the chair, and this is a mistake that a lot of dentists make, they do orthodontics and they see this big high ticket fee of $6,000 or $7,000. But how much time does it really take you? They are far more profitable in general doing crown preps.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've really taken the whole practice management and the scalability of a practice and running 4 or 5 chairs with 3 or 4 hygienists and doing 500 cases a year. Now, having said that, we've just built a new practice and I'm reinventing it. I don't want to be doing 100 cases a day. I want to basically go back to what you're talking about, differentiation, increasing my fee and doing half the number of patients and really enjoying what I do. So, but still from the point of view of using my knowledge. And if I was a general dentist today, I would actually be really, it's interesting. I brought Invisalign to Australia. This is 20 years ago. So I could see the writing on the wall, what a great technique, what a great product. And having said that, for the first 15 years was a terrible product. Okay. The last 5 years, it's actually become a very good product. Okay. Invisalign, and there's all the other competitor aligner products, and a lot of them are pretty good too. Okay. Some aren't, but a lot of them are quite good. But we're seeing now a way, and especially with COVID, because what the dentist can do, it doesn't require aerosols. They can actually still do aligner treatment during COVID. And if COVID comes back, there'll be another issue. But you can really scale up your business, because the one beautiful thing about aligner therapy is there is actually minimal work for a dentist to do. Apart from the clean check or the digital setup, everything else can be given to a hygienist. Now, you could theoretically be getting your hygienist to be doing an hourly rate of nearly $800 an hour, which is phenomenal. So my advice to dentists out there, don't start giving hygienists a percentage commission.
No.
Because I know there are some people out there that do that. And you go, hey, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, no.
Yes, you've got to be very careful. But if you've got them on $55 or $60 or $70 an hour, whatever it be, and they're making $800 an hour for you, that's a great way to scale up your business. And you can still be doing all of your crown preps and all your high-end dentistry in the other chair. So what we've done, and you talk about, finding niches in the market, in our business, we've sort of said, that's great, but you need the knowledge and you need the skill to do the treatment planning. So we developed our own CAPS treatment planning service, where we partnered with a company in the States, and we've done about 150,000 cases between us. So now we can take away all of the difficult situations and do all the treatment planning to basically make it idiot-proof for the dentist. And the great thing about that, as I see it from the point of view of differentiation, most dentists are going to sit back and go, oh, I only use Invisalign or aligners for simple cases. The reason why they use it for simple cases only is because they don't have the skill or the confidence to do all the setups and understand all that. But if we're in the background doing it, I can actually, with my hand on my heart, say to them, it doesn't matter if I was doing the case or they were doing, it's the same setup. So they could do the most difficult cases, and all we got to do is just train them in how to track the case. And that's about an hour of training.
Yeah, and talk about leverage from the point of view for the dentist as well. I mean, that's a phenomenal piece of leverage, because you're leveraging someone else's expertise.
Yep.
You're leveraging technology. You're leveraging your therapist or hygienist's time as well. And so really, there's multiple points of leverage in that system, which I think is phenomenal. And, for dentists listening to that, that's certainly something to think about and to consider. Mate, I wanted to ask you again, just moving forward from that, is as we, come out of this COVID period of time, and as we've kind of all, been reflecting on sometimes the gift that COVID has brought as well. Clearly, there's been a lot of heartache and a lot of headache and challenges with COVID. And I don't for one moment want to diminish that, because there's been a lot of people who've had some really tough times with it. But I also believe it's forced us to rethink a few things, and it's forced us to examine the way we do business, the way we practice, examine what's important in our lives, all those other sorts of things. And so I guess for me, I'm looking for the gift in this. There's that great story. The kid, he's told to shovel out the stable, and there's, a mountain of horse manure. And he's kind of ripping through it, and the boss says, "Well, what are you doing, buddy?" He says, "With this much horse crap in here, there's got to be a pony somewhere, right?" And so I guess what I'm trying to ask is, where's the pony in this for us? Where's the gift?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point. I think the pony is, and it's happened in our practice as well, and businesses. We start to look at staff levels. We start to look at some costings, which people don't do, and I'm as guilty as everybody else. When you're doing well, you don't worry about it. You just say, "Oh, that's fine." I don't. But now I'm actually starting to look more at the business side of things. What don't I need? Because you want to make sure you've got enough money to take home. So I think that's one part. You start to look at the business. I have to say, I've never been as busy as I have over this COVID period, because I'm just finding more things that I want to do to improve my business. And it's like every day I come to work and I have another list of 4 or 5 things to do, whether it's to write an article, change the website, whatever it be. So it's amazing when you start to open your mind. But from another point of view, I don't know whether you've got people that you just don't want to have dinner with. Yeah. Okay. So I've got a few of these people. I'm not going to name them, but I dread the thought of 4 hours over dinner. So what we've been doing is an hour of drinks over Zoom.
Oh, nice.
And I'm thinking, for these people, I'm going to keep that going for the rest of my life. So I don't have to actually sit there for 4 hours and have to communicate. I can just do an hour at a time, and my obligation is done. So that's been real positive.
I hope they never listen to this podcast and figure out it's them, mate.
It's not a dentist, okay? So it'll be okay.
We're all good. Okay. All right. Next time you invite me for Zoom drinks, I'll know.
Exactly right.
I'll go, oh, crap. Mate, that's funny. Well, it is an interesting situation, isn't it? I think for a lot of us who've been thinking about COVID as well, I've certainly looked at our business, through different eyes as well, and we've certainly made some adjustments around that. I think for me, one of the things that I've noticed, and our practice like yours, is busier than it's been for a lot of years, and it's crazy. And I think it goes beyond the pent up demand as well. And because we've been open here in Canberra now for quite some time, so we would have expected that pent up demand to taper off. Clearly, there's some stimulus money floating around the system, but I'm of the view, again, it's a bit like in recessions, lipstick sales go up a lot. There's that expression that, the little luxuries that people have, whether it's coffee or lipstick or whatever it happens to be, to make themselves feel better. And it's interesting. Again, we spoke about this at a workshop a couple of last year. It was a little bit prophetic, and the question we were asking ourselves is, well, if there is a recession coming, and we, candidly, Geoff, I think a lot of us thought that there was a recession coming. None of us predicted it was going to be a pandemic-induced recession. The trigger point had no idea about, but certainly there's a lot of smart commentators saying, the economy is a bit wobbly. And so we were talking about, what's the dental version of lipstick beforehand. And it's interesting, the 2 big things that came up was tooth whitening and aligner therapy.
Exactly right. Aesthetics.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes
affordable,
people feel
conservative aesthetics.
Yep.
And exactly right.
And I think that there's absolute opportunity. If the economy does, dip and dive, or does whatever it does when the stimulus money, is wound back, I believe that the lipstick, in inverted commas, is still going to be there. And so I think for people listening to this, it's about, okay, what are those little luxuries that people are willing to pay for, that they're willing to invest in? And I was talking to an accountant friend of mine. He says to me, it seems that people are either renovating their houses or doing their teeth, and because they've got money.
Well, I've got a friend who works at Bunnings, and they're just so busy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. They're doing things for themselves. And that's where you've got the dentists out there have to look at the opportunities, and I think there's enormous opportunities, but they've got to position themselves as to the benefits to the patient. It's interesting. We're doing something now, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know how legal it's going to be or not with patients, but offering them a free holiday, to have things done, and I can see that to be a real benefit in these times.
Yeah, I can't comment on whether that'll fly or not, but I can see the thinking behind it, and I can see why you might do that. Again, I can't say whether it'll get up or pass muster on any of that sort of stuff, but Yeah, certainly. Again, it's about being creative and thinking a little differently. And the thing around that, Geoff, as well, I don't know about you, mate, but I've had a lot of creative ideas that seemed really good at the time that didn't fly. But
I think I've had more.
Yeah, I think we could probably do a tally. But the point in all of that, though, is I guess for anyone listening, is you might have an idea that seems great now, and you give it a go and it doesn't work. But that doesn't mean it's a bad idea to be thinking creatively and to think outside the box. It just means you've got to find the next thing that will work.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if you ask me about one of the things I've learned in business, because I set up I was the first person to set up the Invisalign Centre in the world, and everybody's heard of Denticare and all those things. I set up the first finance company in 1995. Okay, lost money on all of these ventures. Okay, and they're all now very popular. In fact, there's a product out there now. I don't know whether you've seen, but Invisalign are now putting colours on the aligners.
Oh wow!
I started this 10 years ago with braces, and it didn't fly. But I'm still going to do that because I still think it's going to fly. But the point is, one of my financial advisors, Michael, always said to me, never be the first, be the second. Okay? Because it's really hard to do a whole paradigm shift. You know, there are people out there who are really out there, like myself or yourself, and it doesn't work. But if you can see something that somebody's doing and make it better, which is giving the value proposition to people, it will fly. Let somebody else do. And there's so much out there that's already been started, but you can now take it to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. That's been my whole business methodology, is to look at what other people are doing and put my own flavour to it or spin on it. And I think, I can't remember who it is. I think it was Picasso that had the comment, steal like an artist. And I think it was him. I could be misappropriating that quote. But anyway, nonetheless, the idea is to pinch ideas, great ideas, and then adapt and morph them. I think, one of my frustrations was when people take an idea and don't even adapt it.
Absolutely correct.
Then I think that's a little bit sad and a little bit unimaginative. So I think if you're going to look at things, take an idea and improve it, adapt it, make it your own, whatever it happens to be. And I think you can do very well with that. And I think there's a lot of things, this kind of evolution rather than revolution in many cases, and you'll still do very well with that.
Absolutely correct. There are so many opportunities out there, and if somebody has sat down for 2.5 days and just write down 10 or 15 ideas, and then they cut it down to 3 or 4, that'll keep them going for 12, 18 months.
Oh, easy.
If they really do it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, mate, just really quickly, you said to me that you trained in America, and I'm aware of that.
Yep.
One of the things that I've observed about Americans, one of the things I really admire and appreciate about Americans is their ability to think big.
Yep.
Did you notice that as well?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, and I suppose that's what, when I came back to Australia, and I would tell my parents, I'm going to do this and that, and they would temper me. They go, just get it all going. And the truth probably lies somewhere between. When I look back on it, they tempered me too much, but the Americans give you the fire in the belly.
Yeah.
The other part of Americans is they respect people who are successful.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't do that as much here in Australia.
Yeah.
Which I think is a real negative.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about thinking bigger, because one of the things, when I was a brand new dentist, freshly minted out of dental school, I remember going to the airport because I was on the way to the Navy down in your part of the world, actually down at HMAS Cerberus. And I was getting on a plane at Brisbane Airport. My dad gave me a couple of books, and one of them was The Magic of Thinking Big by a guy called David Schwartz. It was a book that really, really resonated with me. And I wanted to ask you about how to start thinking bigger. So, I mean, at the moment, borders are closed. No one's going to be going to America anytime soon from Australia. And you probably don't even need to go to America to think big. But
no.
How do we take that concept that the Americans do so innately and bring it into dentistry or bring it into our own lives? How do we encourage that?
That's a really good question. And I think that I've been really blessed by having my own mentors. And I still have a mentor in orthodontics. But and you probably have your own mentors too.
I do.
And I think it's important that you have mentors and you surround yourself with the right people. And I remember David Penn saying to me one day, and David being really a modest guy, but a smart businessman. He said, I've been lucky because I've had the right people advising me. And what I've learned, and I wish I learned this 25 years ago, was to have the right team around you. And I used to accept people on the team, that weren't right and I had this stupid thing that I did where I brought people in different projects as equity partners for what we would call sweat equity. And I would never do that ever again. If people want to be an equity partner, they've got to put their money on the line and they've got to work for it. Otherwise, you're giving it away. And every project I've ever done that for has always failed. So you've got to find the right team, the right advisors, whether it be accountants, in dentistry, the right practice management people like yourself, who think outside of the box. And that's what I love about you, Jesse, is, I've dealt with other people, but you're the only one that really thinks outside the box, like this podcast, where you're taking all the other great things in business and seeing how can you utilize it in dentistry, rather than doing the same thing that everybody else is doing and looking at the practice numbers, and that's about all. That's about their definition of practice management.
Well, thank you for that, mate. That's really kind. And, mate, I'm a bit like you in the sense that, I've got a long history of being involved in lots of different things. And I think I shared with you, I learned my communication skills through network marketing. And I remember back in the day, I don't know if I've ever told you this, mate, but back in the day, I wanted to learn to sell because I remember reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in that book, he said, selling is a really good skill to have. And as a consequence, I joined a network marketing group. And I remember finishing dentistry. I was in the Navy, so we finished pretty early at 3:30 or something like that. I'd get out of my white uniform or my black uniform if it was winter, and I'd go door knocking, selling door to door, pots and pans. And I remember my other Navy mates and other dentists, you would kind of scratch their head and kind of wonder, what are you doing that for? And sometimes I did too, to be honest with you. I mean, there were times when I'd have doors slammed in my face, dogs barking, there were lots of good war stories about how it all went terribly awry. Or we'd learn how to do telephone cold calling, and we'd do all these sorts of things. And it's really interesting that I think for you, for me, for all of us, is all those little things that we do along the way, those seeds that we sow. We never quite know what plants are going to grow from that or what we're going to be able to take from that later. And the reason I tell you that story is because my encouragement to anyone listening to this is to get involved in some things that might seem a little bit left of center or a little bit out of the ordinary, because you just don't know what skills you're going to pick up.
And I think the other part too as well, because I think that's a beautiful story and so appropriate, the people that you meet who then become your mentor or they change your lives.
Yeah.
I've got two or three of those people that changed my entire life.
Yep.
And there is fate with who you meet, but if you don't go out and do all this stuff, you don't meet them, and it really will change your whole life and change the way you perceive different things.
Yeah. And just on that theme as well, my plea to anyone listening is to get outside of dentistry for a little while. Yep. As much as the dental profession has been incredibly kind to both you and me, Geoff, and I've got nothing but respect for dentists, and it's a profession that's literally given me everything, wife, kids, you name it. That's all come from dentistry. So I've got deepest gratitude there. But in terms of getting those experiences, I would say to anyone listening, go and do something different. Experience something totally outside the realm of dentistry, because it will change your life. And I think that dentistry can be a bit of an echo chamber from time to time.
Yeah, in some ways, it's a little bit like being in lockdown in COVID. Yeah. You're so focused on, and it can drive you nuts. And I think you're totally correct. Dentistry is fantastic. It's been very kind to me. Like you said, it's been very kind to yourself. But what's been probably kinder is meeting these different people, getting involved in different businesses. And, the only thing I'm going to say to you about when you get involved in different businesses is a little bit like the share market. Make sure you just put aside X amount of dollars that you're willing to lose, because it can become a financial burden and a financial sieve. So it's a little bit like a stop loss order. If I was doing things again, I'd say, this is my investment, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad you added that, mate. That's really, really wise advice. When I was certainly selling door to door, my capital investment was, a couple $100 a month on training materials. It was bugger all, right? So the financial impact was very low. The upside was huge in terms of learning. But I agree, mate. If you're going to put equity into something outside of dentistry, A, know what you're doing.
That's right. Yeah.
And B, have that stop loss in place. That's really key. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really sound. Mate, we've covered a fair bit of territory today.
As always. Sure, when we do our next call together, we're going to go through even more information. I love talking to you, Jesse.
Yeah, me too, mate.
It's fantastic.
It's good fun. So look, mate, I just want to say, Geoff, from all of us here at Savvy Dentist, thank you so much for the conversation today. As always, I find it stimulating and interesting, and I know that you bring so much value to the people that you work with, and I certainly enjoy the interactions that we have and the value that bring to my life, mate. So thank you for all of that as well.
Jesse, no, thank you, because since I met you 2 or 3 years ago, every time I talk to you, I write down another 3 or 4 points of things that I need to do to improve myself, my life, and my practice. So I have to thank you, because you really give me another fire in my belly in what I'm trying to achieve. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, mate. All right, well, you take good care of yourself.
I sure do. You too.
And we'll catch up shortly.
Fantastic. Look forward to it. Thanks,
Cheers,
Jesse. Regards to everybody.
And you too. Cheers, mate.
See you, Jesse. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.